Truly Brown is 14 years old. She has been the center of 3 of the biggest decisions on Sister Wives, and she has not been asked on camera about any of them. Not when her mother packed up and moved her to Utah, not when the legal filings started, not when she walked down the aisle at her mother's wedding carrying the rings. 14 years old, 3 defining moments, 0 on-camera testimony. And yet somehow, this show has managed to make her visible in every single frame, while keeping her completely off the record at the same time. That tension, that specific, deliberate, structural tension, is exactly what this video is about. And if you think you already know this story, stay with me, because the version most people are telling leaves out the most important parts. If you're new here, this channel covers the Brown family with a level of care that a lot of Sister Wives content skips entirely. We don't speculate about minors, we don't read their social media on camera, we don't put words in their mouths, we don't build thumbnails off a 14-year-old's expression. If that's the kind of coverage you want, honest, careful, and actually watchable 5 years from now, hit like, hit subscribe, and stick around. This one matters, and I want to do it right. Now let's get into what actually happened and why it's more complicated than almost anyone is giving it credit for. Christine Brown left Kody in 2021. That part everybody knows. What people sometimes gloss over is that when Christine made that decision, Truly was 11 years old. 11. She didn't get to vote on the marriage. She didn't get to vote on the exit. She was a child living inside a situation that adults had constructed entirely around her. And when those adults decided the situation was over, she was the one who had to move. She was the one who had to change schools, change her daily geography, adjust to a version of family life that looked nothing like the one she had been born into. The adults had the conversation. The adults made the call, and Truly packed her things. The relocation to Utah in 2022 was not a quiet, undisputed transition. Kody was documented, on camera, expressing real opposition to Truly being taken out of state. He talked about it in terms of his access, his ability to remain present in her life, the logistics of maintaining a father-daughter relationship across state lines. And those concerns, taken at face value, are not unreasonable. A parent wanting to stay close to their child is not a radical position. It is, in fact, exactly what you would hope a parent would feel. But here is where the story gets complicated, because the opposition did not hold. At some point, the resistance softened. The fighting stopped. Christine moved to Utah with Truly. And the question nobody on this show has answered cleanly, not Kody, not Christine, not the producers, is what actually changed. Not what Truly thought about it. We're not going there. What changed in the adult calculation? What shifted in Kody's reasoning that made him decide the fight wasn't worth continuing? Because that quiet, undocumented, off-camera decision had enormous consequences for a child, and it was made entirely between grown people in the space where this show never follows its cast. We got the argument on camera. We did not get the resolution, and the gap between those two things is bigger than it looks. Here is the structural trap that Sister Wives walked itself into with Truly. And I want to be precise about this because it is actually a fascinating production problem disguised as a family story. The current arc of the show, the arc that is driving the drama you are watching right now, is built on 4 pillars: Christine's exit, the Utah move, the wedding, and the relationship between Christine's children and David Woolley, her new husband. Truly is load-bearing in all 4 of those stories. She is the child who moved. She is the child who appeared at the wedding. She is the youngest, which means she is the most visible and most emotionally potent symbol of what Christine walked away from and what she is building toward. The show needs Truly present. She is part of the visual language of Christine's new life. When you see Christine in Utah, settled and happy, building something real, Truly is in that frame. She is the proof of concept. She is the evidence that Christine did not just leave a marriage, she built a landing. A real one, with a child, a home, a future. Truly makes that argument without saying a single word, just by being there. But the show cannot put Truly in a confessional chair and ask her how she's really doing. She's a minor. She is in the middle of an ongoing legal situation between her parents. She has not chosen public life the way her older siblings have. Mykelti goes on podcasts. Aspen has her own platform. The older Brown kids have made conscious adult decisions about how visible they want to be. Truly has made no such decision, because she is 14 and that decision is not hers to make yet. so TLC is in a bind that has no clean exit. Mic her up more, and you are putting a child in the center of a custody narrative on cable television. Don't mic her up, and you are making hours and hours of content about a child's life while keeping her perspective entirely off the record. Neither option is good. The show picked the second one, which is probably the more defensible choice, but it is still a choice, and it shapes everything you think you understand about her situation, whether you realize it or not. In 2024, there were legal filings, child support, documentation that falls under the broad, unglamorous category of family law doing what family law does when a marriage ends and a minor child is involved. I am not going to pretend I have full visibility into every filing or every outcome, because I don't, and I'm not going to manufacture certainty I haven't earned. What I will say clearly is this: those filings involve Truly. They are about her financial security. They are about the documented, legally binding obligations her parents carry toward her. They have nothing to do with her preferences or her feelings or what she wants. They are, in the most literal and procedural sense, adults deciding the terms of a child's life inside a courthouse, while that child goes to school and does homework and lives her daily life in Utah. And those legal proceedings were happening at the same time the show was still airing. At the same time, Kody was giving confessionals about the pain of distance. At the same time, Christine was talking about the joy of her new chapter. The legal calendar and the filming calendar were running in parallel, and they were telling very different stories about the same family, and the audience was only seeing one of them. That gap is not unusual for reality television. It is, honestly, standard operating procedure. But it is worth naming here because it goes directly to why Truly's situation is more layered than a surface-level watch of the show would reveal. Now, the wedding. Christine married David Woolley in October 2023. The ceremony has been covered extensively across every SisterWives platform and fan community. The dress, the location, the family members who were there, the ones who weren't. I'm not going to relitigate the guest list here. That is a different video, and frankly, a more tired one. What I want to talk about is one specific, documented, concrete moment that has not received the careful attention it deserves. Truly Brown walked the rings down the aisle at her mother's wedding to David Woolley. That's it. That's the fact. No editorializing, no emotional projection, just the fact. The youngest child of Kody Brown, the man who went on camera opposing the move to Utah, the man whose marriage to Christine ended in one of the most documented, painful, publicly aired ways in this show's history, was the one who carried the rings. Not a flower girl role, not a background appearance. The rings, the physical objects that represent the covenant of the new marriage. She carried them. Whether that was Christine's idea, or David's, or something Truly herself asked to do, I genuinely don't know. Nobody outside that family knows. What I do know is that she was there, in that role, because the adults around her had made a sequence of decisions over 3 years that led to that moment. She didn't choose the divorce. She didn't choose the move, but she was present for the beginning of what came next. And she was carrying its most symbolic objects. And that image, whatever it means emotionally, which again, we are not going to speculate about, is worth sitting with carefully and honestly. Now, I want to do a character study, and I want to flag it clearly as my read. This is analysis built on documented behavior, not established fact, and you should weigh it as such. Kody Brown has a pattern. It shows up not just in his relationship with Truly, but across his relationships with his children from all 4 of his marriages. And it is consistent enough across 15+ seasons that I'm comfortable naming it. The pattern is this. Kody engages most reliably when engagement is comfortable for him, when the child is nearby, when showing up doesn't require him to rearrange something he has already committed to, when the emotional reward of the interaction is accessible without significant logistical effort, and he disengages, or his engagement becomes inconsistent when maintaining the relationship requires sustained effort across difficult circumstances. Circumstances like distance, like conflict, like a relationship that has gone cold and requires deliberate, unglamorous rebuilding rather than natural proximity. You can watch versions of this play out with Maddie during her pregnancy and the distance conversations, with McKelty during the periods of documented strain, with his sons from Janelle's side when those relationships became publicly complicated. In every case, Kody uses sweeping, profound language about family, legacy, covenant, love. The language is large. And then the actual logistics, the flights booked, the calls made consistently, the showing up when nothing is filming, those logistics have not always matched the language. With Truly specifically, my read is this. The Utah fight ended not because Christine gave ground on a key point, and not because a court imposed a specific resolution, but because fighting had become harder than not fighting. That is my interpretation. I could be wrong, but the behavioral record across this show is consistent enough that I'm naming it, carefully, as a theory about why a father who said he opposed the move eventually stopped opposing it. He did not want to lose proximity to his youngest child. He also did not sustain the effort required to prevent it. And somewhere in the space between those two things, a 14-year-old ended up in Utah. This brings me to the part that I think gets missed in most Sister Wives coverage, because most coverage plants a flag in one camp or the other, pro-Christine or pro-Kody, and neither position leaves room for the more uncomfortable and more honest observation. Kody on camera, talking about missing Truly, reads as genuine. I want to be clear about that. I am not accusing him of performing grief he doesn't feel. When he talks about the distance and what it means to not be part of his youngest child's daily life, something in that lands as real. Grief does not have to be fabricated to also be incomplete. But Christine's account, and she has given versions of this account across multiple interviews and on the show itself, is that the actual rhythm of contact has not matched what the camera moments imply. Those visits have not been as regular as the confessionals suggest, that the emotional weight of missing someone and the practical, scheduled, boring follow-through of staying connected are two entirely different things. I cannot adjudicate between those two accounts. I was not there. I do not have access to anyone's phone records or travel history. What I can say is that when there is a documented gap between what someone says on camera and what the people closest to them describe off camera, the most honest response is to hold both accounts and acknowledge that the truth probably lives somewhere in the uncomfortable middle. And that middle is genuinely difficult to sit with because it does not let anyone off the hook cleanly. If the calendar does not match the confessionals, then the audience has been given a version of Kody's relationship with Truly that is curated, not necessarily dishonest in its emotion, not necessarily cynical, but curated in the sense that the pain of separation has been shown, and the effort required to close that separation has been less visible. And those two things, shown and not shown, add up to a picture that is incomplete in ways that matter. Let me bring this back to the thesis of the show, because I think it deserves to be said plainly. The foundational promise of plural marriage, as the Brown family has articulated it across 15 seasons and counting, is that more adults means more love, more consistency, more coverage for the children. It is not purely a religious argument. It is a practical one. The claim is that children raised in a polygamist family structure benefit from having more parental figures, more community, more people in their corner. That is the argument the show has made, implicitly and explicitly, since the first episode. Truly is the test case for that thesis. She is the youngest. She was born into the fullest version of the Brown family structure. 4 wives, a large and sprawling sibling network, multiple adults in consistent proximity. She had, at least in theory, more parental coverage than almost any child in a conventional family. And now she is 14 years old, living in Utah, in a household with 1 mother and 1 stepfather. A sibling network that is divided across geography and fractured by the events of the past few years. And a biological father whose contact with her has been, by multiple accounts, inconsistent. The thesis of the family structure got tested on the youngest child, and the math did not come out the way the thesis promised. I want to be careful here because I do not want this to land as a sad kid story. It is not. Truly has Christine, who by every visible and documented account is a deeply present and committed mother. She has David, who, from everything Christine has described and from what the show has shown, is integrating into the family in ways that appear genuine and grounded. She has siblings she maintained closeness with through the move and the transition. She has David's children, who are now part of her daily world. She has a circle. It is smaller than the one she was born into. It is differently shaped than what the plural marriage structure promised. But it is real, and it functions, and the adults in her life built it with care. The story is not that Truly is struggling. The story is that the adults around her built her a good outcome, and they built it around her not with her voice on the record, not with her perspective accessible to the audience, not in a way that allows any of us watching at home to actually know what Truly Brown makes of any of this. A child can be safe and loved and well cared for, and still have had every significant decision of her recent life made entirely by the grown people around her. Those things are not in conflict. That is, in fact, what childhood usually looks like. The reason it is worth naming here is that SisterWives has built its entire identity on the idea of radical transparency, on letting the audience see the real dynamics, the real arguments, the real costs, and the one area where the show has been entirely, structurally, categorically silent is the interior experience of the youngest child at the center of its most consequential storylines. That silence is not an accident. It is a decision. And understanding that it is a decision changes how you watch everything around it. Truly Brown will be 18 in 4 years. When she gets there, she will be an adult with the full ability to decide for herself what she wants to say, what she wants to share, what version of her own childhood she chooses to offer to an audience that has been watching her since she was small enough to be carried. She will have every option that she does not have right now. She will be able to speak, or not speak, entirely on her own terms. Until then, the most respectful thing the audience can do is not pretend to know her story for her, not scroll her social media and report back to a comment section about whether she seems happy or sad or close to Kody or distant from the older kids, not to decide, based on 3 seconds of footage from a wedding, what her emotional relationship to any of this actually is. We do not know. We genuinely, factually, completely do not know. And in the absence of knowledge, the right move is to hold the space, let her grow up, and wait for her to tell it herself when and if she ever chooses to. What we can do is look honestly at the adults, because the adults are the story here. Kody's documented pattern of engagement, Christine's decisions and the costs she was willing to pay, the legal filings and what they represent, the wedding and who carried the rings, the gap between what the cameras captured and what the calendar reflects. Those are stories about grown people making choices. And grown people are fair game. They chose public life. They signed the contracts. They sat in the confessional chairs. The analysis of their behavior is legitimate. The 14-year-old is not the story. She is the reason the story matters. If you made it to the end of this video, you already understand why I built it the way I built it. You can feel the difference between this and the content that speculates about a minor's feelings based on a clip. This is the channel that tries to cover this family without crossing that line. And if you want more of that, the subscribe button is right there. And it costs you nothing. Drop a comment if you think I got something wrong. I don't have inside access. I'm working from what's been documented and reported. And if there's something I missed or framed incorrectly, I genuinely want to know. That's how this works. That's what makes it worth watching. Truly will have her turn eventually. Until then, we watch the adults, we hold the line, and we try to do this right.